Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Life is But a Dream podcast. So, quick disclaimer I am filming on my phone. This microphone, again, is not on, it is not working. And that's just because I've been having some technical difficulties. I am having storage issues, which leads to editing issues. And I have made a personal goal to myself to upload 10 podcast episodes by September 26th. And, instead of naming all the reasons why I can't do it, I was telling myself, why don't you tell yourself all the ways that you can make it happen? So I'm making it work. If this didn't sound decent, then you wouldn't be hearing it right now. So thank you. I just wanted to put that out there. So today I wanted to talk about something that is the start to a conversation or a series of conversations that I want to start, and that's on the topic of femininity. Specifically, my experience as a trans woman and my experience of the feminine experience. So before I dive in, I wanted to make it very clear, I do not claim womanhood. That is not a story that I claim. But I do claim the feminine experience. Womanhood belongs to women, especially those who have lived that journey since birth. But what I do claim is the feminine experience, because that, whether you agree with my transness or not, that is the reality that I live on a day-to-day basis. And here's why I want to make that distinction. So a lot of women, cis women, have come to me personally and have asked, how do you tap into that feminine energy? How do you get courted? How do you get treated in relationships the way a feminine woman would? Or men showing me chivalry, or just receiving in ways that they don't seem to be. And that really opened my eyes, because I realized that it's not that women aren't feminine, but we live in a society where women have either been made to, or they choose to, hustle and to provide and to be hard, and that being vulnerable is not a strength of theirs, or been made to think that, or etc., different cases like that. And, that has really taken the feminine experience away from a lot of women, whether it has been implemented or taken from them, or they chosen not to, even probably without realizing it, and realize how much of a choice that it is. I am a prime example of that it is a choice. And I want to just let it be known, women are the source of femininity. And where I have come to learn all that I have come to learn on the topic, on the ways of being, to create the person that I am and the experience that I experience on a day-to-day basis. I want to talk about the difference that I see between womanhood and femininity, and why a lot of women aren't living those feminine experiences. And if you choose to, you can become conscious of it and make the choice on how you want to be, how you want to show up, and in order to get the life that you want, the way you want to be treated, the way you want to be perceived, and all that good stuff. So let's get started. I want to talk about the difference that I see between womanhood and the feminine experience, and why a lot of women aren't fully living that feminine experience, and why it's not their fault, and how they can make their way back to that, or find it for the first time in their lives if they choose to. And later on in future episodes, I will go into how to step into that feminine energy and what that might look like. But today I'm just kind of laying the preface down on where I stand on the topic. Okay, so first I want to start off with what I have conceptualized, and what, by definition, womanhood is identified within sex, rooted in biology and lived history. And with the feminine experience, it's more social, relational, and energetic roles / responses people encounter when they present or embody femininity. So, just to be clear, I am not trying to redefine womanhood or take it away from anyone. I'm just simply sharing my experience and what I have lived within the feminine experience. And so, first thing I want to talk about is why women haven't fully experienced the feminine. Modern day society has pushed women to, more masculine coded traits as far as, feeling like they need to hustle, feeling like they need to be the provider, feeling like they need to, not be vulnerable and not use their emotions, or that emotions are even a weakness of theirs. Feeling like they always need to take leadership roles, or they need to be independent, or that they can't depend on people, or they feel guilt when it comes to depending on people. If you choose to do those things, it is not a bad thing. I don't think anything in life is good or bad. It's just whether that works or if it doesn't work for you. And if that works for you, then I love that for you. More power to you. But I'm talking about specifically what society and culturally has been deemed feminine and what that looks like. And you can have a mixture of both. You can be independent but still be submissive. You can still be very emotional, but you still come with a lot of logic. Nothing's black and white. And like I said, nothing's right or wrong. It's just what works and what doesn't work for you. And just know, if you aren't a perfect blueprint of what femininity looks like, know that one, is not your fault. As far as, economy goes, economics and social change, all that has required women to step into more masculine roles. And, it's not your fault, but, it is up to you to decide if you want to be conscious of it and make your way back to a feminine living. Some of it is societal, making women feel like they need to do it all, but some of it is chosen, as far as, choosing independence. And, because of this, many women say that they don't experience chivalry, being courted, or being held in feminine energy. And so, it may lead you to question, how can I make my way back to femininity without losing empowerment? And, that is a very valid question that I feel like comes up for a lot of women when they think about stuff like this. But again, it really is, nothing's black and white. It's just simply about what works and what doesn't work for you, and how you can find a balance between the two. And, there isn't a set way of things. It's just how you want to live your life and what feels authentic to you. And you may be asking, like, what does this feminine experience even look like? And, that is a tough question. It depends on where you're at, who you grew up with, etc. But, this is just like culturally what we have come up with on what that might look like. And, when in dating relationships, that could be, being courted, men initiating. If you've ever felt like you've been putting more effort into a relationship with a man than he has with you, that's masculine energy. Or, doors being open for you, chairs being pulled out, bills being covered, that is kind of what a feminine experience could look like. Or receiving compliments on your beauty, your aura, your softness, and this would be versus being acknowledged for your strength or your achievements. That would be more culturally masculine. Or the feminine experience within friendships, like male friends stepping in to protective provider energy, covering checks, helping you out physically, whether you're dating or not, like just friends, like you evoke that in friends. I notice, like, sometimes when I go to the store or other places with my male friends, and they will open the doors and they will cover the bill, or they will be like on the lookout if I'm approached by someone else. I do like to uphold a certain image, and that does get me attention. Male friends, they do notice. I do notice and sense a sense of protectiveness, whether they even notice it or not. It's simply what you evoke in the people around you with the energy that you give off. Or female friends would be, bonding over openness, emotions, nurturing energy. That's example like what feminine relationships, friendships could look like. Being very emotionally vulnerable, being very open, and being very emotions based. And again, you can experience with this with your guy friends as well. But again, this is just culturally, socially, what we have deemed as feminine and not feminine, and what naturally evokes those feminine qualities. And that's what makes people themselves, and that's what gives people those spectrums. You will have those guy friends who can be very emotional, can be very vulnerable, and technically that is femininity, but that's not a bad thing at all. We all have that duality within us. It's just whether or not we choose to allow it to have balance, whether we feel like we need to lean one way stronger than the other, because some people will fight it. There's a lot of men in life that you can probably think of, maybe even in your life, where they really hold on to that masculine side, and maybe they feel scared to even step into that more feminine side, to slide down on the spectrum a little bit. And again, that's not their fault. That probably comes from a sense of trauma or something that happened to them, or being told different ideas growing up that that's not what men do, and so they're literally scared to do so. But in life, I believe that we need balance in all areas of life. And so what would it look like if you decided to question yourself? Like, what would that look like if I brought more balance to not even just your femininity or masculinity, but just in life in general? Like, what would balance in your life look like, and what would that create for you? And in public life, this can look like strangers offering help, more intention in public, more social permission to show softness. And I have noticed that, and that is a very interesting point. I have noticed since I've transitioned, this was almost 10 years ago now, which is so crazy to think, but I did notice that I get a lot more attention in public, a lot more people willing to help me, a lot more people paying attention to me in the first place to then give them the opportunity to want to help me. In public life, that also could look like safety concerns and awareness of vulnerability. So, I will have guy friends make sure that I'm walked to my car, or make sure that I get home safely, or I do have a boyfriend. If I haven't mentioned that before yet on these podcasts, but he is a very masculine man, and I feel like that is what's led us to have such a successful relationship so far, because I am a very feminine being, and so we have that duality, we have that balance within each other. I have my boyfriend, so I do have those credentials on knowing what it's like to come into a relationship that has been built off of acknowledgement of my femininity, and my acknowledgement of his masculine energy, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. And in the past, I have only dated men who do hold that masculine energy, not my whole entire life, but until I started to be conscious on the way that I was showing up in the relationships that I was creating in my life, and figuring out the results that I want and how I can get there, and what I would need to do, different ideas to uphold and whatnot. And this is all, what's the word? You're not obligated to do any of these things. Again, if it's just about realizing the type of life that you want, the way you want to be treated, and when you're conscious of that, you can show up in a way that's congruent with that. And as far as energy and polarity in general, feminine experience often centers on receiving, nurturing, and attracting, and masculine experience centers on giving, doing, and protecting. So, maybe you are a woman who has lived a life, an experience where you felt like you did have to center on giving and doing and protecting those around you. And that is totally fine. And if you love doing that, then that is amazing. But just know energetically that is more leaning towards a masculine perspective. So again, nothing's right or wrong. It's just, does that work for you? If it does, perfect, great, I love that for you. I have a lot of amazing, powerful women in my life who do lean more masculine energetically, but you know, that makes them them, and that's a beautiful thing. And if they choose to want to step more into femininity, then they have someone here who can make them be a little bit more conscious about the ways that they're showing up, the ideas or mentalities that they have, and if they want to shift that, then they can, because it's totally possible. I am an example of someone who may not have been born into it, not only not being naturally born female, but you know, even for naturally born females, women who haven't always been feminine or grew up with what that looks like, or maybe they had a very masculine mother or whatever the case, you know, you can come into that and you can learn how to step into that feminine energy. And so a big part of this topic that I think we get to have, if we're being 100% honest and, you know, coming with an open mind, we get to acknowledge that, you know, sex is biological. You know, that's science. That is, you know, undeniable. But gender roles are chosen, and they are reinforced and enforced by society. And, you know, if you think that's not true, you are coming from, you know, a mindset that isn't accepting reality. You know, I am an example of someone who has chosen my gender, and it's been reinforced the ways that I have chosen to show up, and it has given me concrete results on a feminine experience, you know? So if that doesn't go to show that, you know, gender is a social construct, then I don't know what is. You know, I'm not debating whether sex is a construct or not, because it's not. You know, it's science, it's fact. But also is sociology, you know, that is a fact, that is science. You know, the way humans interact with each other, that is science as well. For my analytical brain, you know, this all is very reassuring to me. And if you are more analytical brained and you're trying to understand like where people are coming from, where trans people might be coming from, then, you know, it's simply, you know, energy is all energy, and that's science as well. So, you know, and something I've learned is that wise thinkers are people who don't just accept ideas that have been told to them and just deem that as fact. You know, wise thinkers ask why questions. They ask how that came about, why it came about, why we continue to think that specific way. And you get to choose on your own whether you want to adhere to those ideas that have been told to you, or if you want to form new ideas or new ways of being based off of what you want out of life. Because life isn't about, or it may be about it in your life, but imagine what it would be like if your life wasn't about what other people thought, or other people's ideas, or this group of people's idea, whether it's a religion, whether it's a community, your family, whatever the case may be. You know, you don't have to adhere to that. You know, what risks might you run into? You know, being rejected or being ostracized or whatever the case, but you know, what risks are you willing to take in order to live the life that you want? And is the way that you're living the idea of upholding other people's ideas, is that working for you, or is it not working for you? If it is, perfect. That's amazing for you. But, you know, imagine how powerful it would be if you decided to come up with your own ideas and settle on what works in your world and what you want to create for yourself. And to kind of wrap things up, I want to end this by honoring the women in my life, women in general. You know, you are source. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to embody the feminine experience. I wouldn't be able to learn and be inspired in such a way that has allowed me to literally change my life in a way that represents what naturally has come to me in so many ways, that feminine energy, but really learning on what it's like to fully embody that. You know, I like to think that I've naturally been born with a lot of feminine energy, And that is what has led me to the experience that I had in my early life in order to make the decision to transition and to live my life fully leaning into that feminine energy in order to make me feel at home, in order to make me feel like I'm being authentic, what's authentic to me, what naturally flows through me, and, you know, on what leaning into that full femininity looks like and what it can look like for me. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all the women out there listening. I love you, and I appreciate you for being you, which might even sound silly. Like, I appreciate you for being the naturally born woman that you are. But yes, thank you. Thank you for being you. You know, it's a beautiful thing. And, you know, again, I am not teaching womanhood. I am just reflecting on femininity. You know, there's probably a lot of men in your life who you know who are very feminine and hold a lot of these feminine traits. And that's a beautiful thing, you know? And this is just simply me bringing into consciousness on what that feminine energy looks like. And if you choose to hold it close and, you know, fuel that, then beautiful. That's why I'm here. So I do want to invite you guys to have a little bit of a moment of reflection. You know, where in your life do you lean more into that masculine energy, that masculine source? And where in your life do you feel like you could lean more into that feminine source in order to get the life and results that you want? Or maybe you're happy where you are, and that's a beautiful thing too. But maybe just ask, you know, like, where am I leaning? Because wherever that is, it's a beautiful thing, because you are perfect the way that you are. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I love you guys so much. I want to say thank you for watching this. If you're watching this right now, you are the reason why I'm here. You are the reason why I am having these conversations. So thank you. Make sure that you share this with anyone that you think might benefit. Hint, that's everyone. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon in the next episode. Bye.